on this theme of talking about whether are people doing good or are they just trying to appear good? Well, as business leaders, a few years ago, Spotify made this big push to try to be one of the big podcast platforms. Spotify really wanted to really cement themselves in the industry. And so what they did is they went and spent a lot of money buying up a lot of podcasts. And I remember back when they did it, there was a bunch of, let's call them purchases or hires that they did that everyone was questioning. Why is that person getting a Spotify deal? Because it was quite obvious that a lot of it was purely just for, let's say, woke points, if I might say that. That the people didn't actually have any skill, didn't have any experience, didn't have any really pull in podcasts, but there was a whole bunch of people being given massive deals with Spotify to for Spotify to really capture and say, hey, look, we for everyone, and we're all inclusive, and we include everyone and offer deals to everyone. Well, now I think they're changing their mind. They obviously did it to appear good, but was it really doing good? And well, now if doing good means for the bottom line of the business, no, it was not. Because now Spotify are realizing, hang on a second, we can either try to appear good or we can actually run a good business. And a good business makes profit, and you don't make profit by paying people that aren't making you money. It's just, at the end of the day, that's it. And so one of those deals that has fallen through is the good old Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Yep. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have had their Spotify deal. Well, you know what? Their PR company said they've agreed to part ways. But we all know what that means. That means that one person got fired, and then they agreed to say that it was amicable. So this deal, they had a $25 million deal that was meant to span 2 years. It only lasted 1 year for 12 episodes. Now, 25 million, even if that was over 2 years, that's almost $1 million per episode, Dr. Rod. Wouldn't it be nice for us to get $1 million per episode? How about that?
Oh, sure it would. I saw a beautiful Maserati on my way to a meeting this morning. I'd love to be able to pay cash for one of those.
You don't want to buy a Maserati. Too many problems. But yeah, it's interesting. $1 million per episode. Now, I've got no problem with capitalism. Got no problem. Got no problem with people making money. I've got no problem with people making money if they are returning on that value, right? You know, we always look at it in business as ROI. What's the ROI? What's the return on investment, right? And quite obviously, their investment of $1 million per, almost, just over $1 million per episode, they agreed that they were not getting the return, and so they've cancelled it. So I think it's quite interesting that this was I actually found this from Candace Owens from her show. She breaks down the fact that this other artist called Jamil Hill, her podcast is called Jamil Hill is Unbothered or something like that, and how average it is. And we actually look at this podcast, and it's really weird that in this podcast, it's just her. Almost looks like it's on her phone, not really very good lighting, just some headphones, and that's kind of it. And it's sort of like, well, if you're being paid a lot of money from Spotify, wouldn't you be investing in your set and creating good value content? But she wasn't. And going on Meghan Markle, you listen to her podcast, and her podcast was just, I don't know. Go and listen to it. Actually, don't. I won't encourage you to go and listen to it. Watch the link of the video of Candace Owens. She plays a little bit. She plays enough of it that you don't need to listen anymore. But yeah, it's interesting that Spotify were trying to appear good by having these people on, and it's backfired. It's backfired in their back pocket, and now they're backpedaling and cancelling and changing the way. Also, it seems like Meghan Markle on this trend as well. She tries to put up this front and tries to appear like this victim, and she tries to appear like she's a good person, but it's quite obvious that she's not. It's quite obvious that there's some issues there. So, Dr. Rod, obviously, talking about Spotify from this business perspective, obviously we've discussed many times with this go woke, go broke, right? And Spotify were trying to do the inclusive quota thing, and it's obviously come back and bit them on the butt. They're now aware that it's not worthwhile for them, so they're canceling all these things. How do we as an organization, how do we make the right decision? How do we know we're making the right decision to know that we're making it to be good, not necessarily appear good?
Well, you've really got to know where you stand. You've got to make your decisions based on first principles. So go back to your first principles and ask yourself the question, is this decision consistent with those principles? In the case of Spotify, I think they wanted to diversify, and they made a strategic decision to invest a lot of money in what they saw as talent. I guess it's a moot point in terms of whether or not they were deliberately trying to wokeify their program lineup, bearing in mind that they started out as a music platform, of course. Yes. Look, I think it's a commercial decision primarily, and I know lots of conservative commentators want to believe that the podcast was rubbish. I listened to the first couple of episodes. Look, technically it was quite okay, and Meghan Markle has actually got a lovely voice. She's got a good voice for podcasting. My personal opinion was that the program was too introspective. Some people would say that she and her guests were self-absorbed, which doesn't usually generate a lot of empathy or interest within an audience. But they did win a People's Choice Award, so there must have been a few people who liked what they were doing. But look, I think the decision is primarily a commercial decision because Meghan and Prince Harry weren't the only ones who were axed from the lineup. Whether or not we can say this is an example of go woke, go broke, I don't know. I think that's probably pushing it a little bit too far. But they took a strategic decision, which in the end obviously hasn't produced the kinds of financial results that they were looking for. So look, I don't necessarily think that's a failure of leadership because we all make mistakes. The real issue for leadership is what have we learnt from it. But perhaps if they had a set of first principles, maybe, for example, if they had said, look, our business is the music business, maybe they wouldn't have gone down that route at all, and they would have looked at other ways of building their audience share or capitalising on their expertise as a platform for music and musicians. I don't know, but...
Well, that trend, if we're talking about that particular trend, there is, across all platforms, long-form content is now the game.
It seems to be. That's right. Yeah, it does.
That's with podcasts and stuff like that, because you can have more advertisers on it. There's more money to be made in it. There's more engagement rather than people checking on music in the background. With a podcast, people are actually engaged. So that's why they've made this move there. And there's a lot of people like that's why YouTube are now, kind of supporting long form content, which is interesting because they're also pushing shorts. But that is their game. Is they know that podcast is where their business is at, really. And so, I mean, I don't know. You say she has a good voice for podcasts. I don't know. I kind of disagree with you.
I like her voice. I think she's got a great voice.
She just sounds condescending to me. Just condescending,
Well, I don't think that's necessarily a voice issue. I think this. it's what I would probably call introspective, and I just don't know that that's necessarily going to generate a large audience. Look, this will probably sound pretty corny, but the pastor in me wants to grab hold of those two and give them a big hug and say, listen,
Yeah.
I just want to walk with you,
Yeah.
because they're both hurting.
Yeah.
They both come from highly dysfunctional family backgrounds.
Yeah.
Look at their history. Look at their current relationships with family. And honestly, if you're going to be a good leader, you really need to have a good, solid family background, or at least if you don't, you need to deal with it. And I just think they need a lot of help, a lot of love. I'd love to pastor them. Honestly, I would. They've got a lot of potential. I don't think they are leaders at the moment because they're not having significant influence, and I don't think they're empowering people. But I do think they've got the potential to be absolutely amazing leaders. I know it sounds corny. I'd love to just be in their world and walk with them and just help them through some of these issues, because I think there's a lot of potential there.
Well, that's beautiful, Dr. Rod. That really is. That is for you to take that approach, because I don't know, she just annoys me. I remember
that's a good reason for getting alongside somebody, isn't it?
I know. Like, look, the fact that you that's why we're a good team, Dr. Rod. You bring that up. You bring the good out in all of us, which is good. So let's. I think that's you've set me for a 6, right? Just taking that approach. I'm like, oh, yeah, all right. I feel bad. Because I agree. Like, they're hurt people, and they do just need some love, and they need some guidance around them. So, back on Spotify, they've made this decision. Now, you're saying it's not a bad leadership decision or anything like that. I agree. It's not. They made a decision and it didn't work for them, so they're now changing that decision. Sometimes we as leaders need to accept that we made a mistake and do some drastic changes. Now, obviously, I'm sure that this decision, although in our circles, the people that I view and everything like that, they all are praising this and everything like that. But I'm sure they're copping a lot of backlash from cancelling these people and stuff like that. So how do we make that change in decision? That, you know what, we made a mistake. Yeah. Now, how do we backtrack or change ways? Because that's not very common in leadership for them to kind of admit defeat and change ways.
Well, look, it often happens in the business world. It's just that you don't get as much publicity because you're not as well known, for example, as Spotify is, and you're not removing people from your roster who have a high profile. So it's common. We often make strategic mistakes. In fact, many companies probably make more mistakes than they make, good decisions. I think as leaders, once it becomes apparent that we've made a bad decision, that we front up to it and reverse it if we can, or take other corrective action as soon as possible, so that we don't damage the business or the organisation or the group of people that we lead.
That's a really good point.
We don't have the information to make a good judgment, but what really matters is, on the basis of the information that they had available to them at the time, was that a reasonable decision to make? Look, all of the platforms are now pretty similar. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah.
Short form, long form is available on just about all of the social media platforms now. So what we're really seeing, it's the old Harold Hotelling hamburger stand story. It's a very famous article.
Tell me that story. I haven't heard that story.
I'm sure most economists would have read it. Certainly economists my age would have read it. Harold Hotelling wrote a paper. It was based on the idea that there are two guys selling hamburgers on a beach. And in order to maximise their market, they actually end up moving closer together, because if you move closer to your competition, you're likely to grab hold of a little bit of the competition's market. So what ends up happening is that the two hot dog stands end up being side by side. That's the gist of the article. And you actually see this repeated time and time again in all kinds of markets. This is what's going on in the social media market now.
Yeah.
Earlier on, there were very clear differences, for example, between YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and then the streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music and so on. But now it's very difficult to distinguish any of them. And so I think their leadership now struggles to identify a point of difference.
Yeah.
So you could argue that Spotify made a good strategic decision at the time based on their expectations about what their contracts would bring in terms of size of audience and advertising revenue and subscribers and so on. But the market's changed since Spotify made that decision. It's a very crowded market now and becoming more so. So I think their big dilemma now is, okay, we've made a mistake. We're taking some corrective decisions. That's good leadership. Now the issue is, so, okay, what are you going to do in the future based on the information that you now have?
How do you make sure that you're not delaying that decision too long? Right, because there are always times in our businesses, in our lives as leaders, we need to make a tough decision. And sometimes a lot of the times it's much easier to just kick the can down the road.
Oh, it is.
But,
we like to procrastinate, especially, look, this is true for most Christian leaders. We don't like to hurt people.
Yeah.
And often Christians in business are very, very reluctant to sack anyone or to let a contract go because there are people at the other end.
Yeah.
People who are relying on you for income, to pay their own bills and so on and so forth. My view will sound a little bit harsh, but, and business leaders in particular, you need to hear this. You're not God. It actually isn't your job to give someone else a job.
That's good.
Now, the thing about it is if you hang on to employees for too long after you've made a strategic mistake and you're starting to lose money, the whole business will eventually collapse, and then you won't be giving anybody a job, including yourself. So I think you've got to understand this. God is our provider. God provides for you as an entrepreneur or a business owner. God provides for all of your staff, all of the people you've contracted and so on as well. And at a point in time, he may well be doing that through your business. But I don't believe that it is biblical to actually sacrifice a business by holding on to staff when it becomes readily apparent that continuing to pay them is actually going to be the ruination of the business.
That's really good. That's really good. So we're not being good stewards of what God has given us if we as leaders are not making those tough decisions in the moments that we need to make them.
No,
we need to be constantly up on our reports, on our numbers, constantly getting feedback from our team and looking at the analytics. Like we need to be constantly looking at that. And when we do, we need to make decisions. I can't remember who, I think it was Gary Vee used to always say, hire slow, fire fast. And I'm sure he got it from somewhere else as well. But it's that way that sometimes we in business, we have to make a tough decision. Make that decision quick. Don't let it linger on. As Dr. Rod said, you're not God, so you're not the people's provider. We have responsibilities, but we also ultimately, especially as leaders, we need to know where our responsibility lies. It's not necessarily in our a decision that we made. Our responsibility is, maybe it's to shareholders, maybe it's to our staff, maybe it's to our family, whatever it is. We need to know as leaders, where does our responsibilities lie, and make the tough decisions around that. Hey, you just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you like that, hit the like button and put a comment below. Hey, if you want to watch more videos like this, check out our channel, and while you're there, make sure you subscribe.